that. I felt the Spirit of a living God falling afresh. I felt that Spirit falling afresh on this congregation, on you, on many of you. I could felt my mom's here from Nevada. She's, 83 years old, I think now, and I saw her kind of moving her shoulders, and she was moving around, and it's just, and I know what some of you are going through. I look out, I see you, Polly, are here, and Pat, and I know this young lady here who's got a couple have a baby coming in March, and I know that baby is just feeling all this love and energy. There's something about when people across the generations dance. People dance, young people dance in clubs all together, and older people sometimes dance at home around the radio or what have you. But when we all dance together, it's like a wedding. That's the only time really for a lot of us where we have older people and younger people all dancing together. And there's something just truly special about this. All my life, I've been waiting for a community of people, spiritual seekers who are wanting to be together to truly explore the reaches of the Spirit and the reaches of humanity and what is possible between us and among us and within us. Happiness, which we have the right to pursue here in the United States, it's a fleeting emotion. It's like happenstance is from the same root. It's a fleeting thing, but joy is when we touch something eternal. Joy is a lasting thing that we take, where Mariella was telling us to take some of that energy. I could still feel it. I don't know about you. I can still feel from the clapping and everything, the vibration in my body. And when she said, take that to some place that's hurting or needs love and attention, it reminded me how we can take the joy that exists always all around us, and we can take it into us, and we can use it to heal ourselves and to heal others and to bring joy to the world, because joy is connected to something eternal. And so today, I really want to talk about connecting the head and the heart, two things that have been so divided in Western society since the Enlightenment. And we need to begin to bring these things back together, the head and the heart. We need both the head and reason and logic and all those things to help us understand our world and make meaning, but we need the knowledge that we can only get through our bodies as well. We often talk about feeling something, in my gut. I know it. I have this intuition. I have this sixth sense, we say. There's sometimes when we know something in our body where our mind can't even understand it. Sometimes we talk about being beside ourselves. I'm beside myself. That's usually because there's a rush of emotion and feelings within us that's too much for our cognitive mind to even understand. And so we're sort of beside ourselves. I'm going to talk about some of the ways that we can understand being beside ourselves, actually stepping outside of ourselves, if you will, and experiencing the world that's within this world, but also beyond this world. So I want to talk about ecstatic worship or transcendence a little bit with you this morning. I want to share some examples of this from my own experience of traveling around the world, and then make sense of it for our lives today and for this congregation and community. Ecstatic comes from the Latin ex stasis. So this word stasis or static means still, stance, or position, to be static. And then X means to move out of or to leave behind. So ecstatic is to leave your usual status, to leave your usual position or self behind, to step beyond it or beside it. Many cultures have ways of stepping outside of our static roles and identities to enter another kind of consciousness. Michael Meade, the great mythologist, explains this from the Irish point of view. There is another world that is deeper, richer, and more subtle that is around us all the time. People use many ways of touching this reality. They use song and dance and chanting and jumping around and even drugs. Today I'm going to share some examples of transcendence from these travels I did around the world. If Randall's up there, if you could put that. So I spent, in my 20s, I spent 3 years on a mountain bike bicycling around the world. So this is a little map of the first 2 years. I started way over on the upper right side in Japan, crossing through Japan and biking across China and down through Nepal and India over the Himalayas and into Tibet and India and Pakistan up to the border of Afghanistan, and then back across India through Thailand and Vietnam and across southern China and into the Philippines. And then if you'll go to the next slide, I spent another year bicycling down from Poland through Eastern Europe, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, into Turkey and Syria and Jordan and Israel and Egypt. And so on this trip, I met some of the most fascinating people and watched, and in some cases experienced, certain practices that people do. And so if you'll go to the next slide, these folks live right on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. They're called the Kailash people. There used to be a country called Kailashistan, which was split in half when the British left India, and they were split between Pakistan and India. And so now they still maintain up in the mountains, up near Chitral in Pakistan, right on the border of Afghanistan, their traditions as best they can, because they're not Muslims, so they have to do this as much as they can away from a lot of the pressures of their culture. These are the women, these are the costumes they wear every day. If you'll show the next picture really quickly, you'll see that you see how they're all walking down the street with their arms together. When I was there, they were in the midst of a harvest ritual, so that every other night they would all get together in a clearing right outside, beyond where everybody lived. And the youngest boys would start on the drums, and they would start drumming. And the women, all the women of all ages, would lock arms like this in a circle, and they would just spin and spin. In the middle of the circle were these young boys drumming. And then as the night went on and it got darker and it got later, the older men, the fathers, and that generation started drumming. And then by the time it was 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, these folks had been spinning and drumming and dancing for hours, literally all night long. The elder men got out there, and they were the most amazing drummers, and they just got going, and the drums and the beats and the dancing, and they spun themselves into a trance, if you will. And this was one of the ways that they understood that they could have a transcendent experience, an experience that was still within this world and yet touching something that is far beyond this world. So I could talk about this all morning, but I want to share a few other experiences so I can take it to where we are. So if you'll go to the next slide, this young man this is in India, along in the desert of India, a tribe called the Warli tribe. And this is the groom from the tribe. That's how grooms get dressed up. They don't have tuxedos there. To get to this wedding, I was out in a very rural part of India, and there was a clinic where there was a doctor who spoke English, and there were a whole bunch of people all in line waiting to see him. And I came to ask him if there were any kinds of rituals that are happening among the tribes around that area that I could go to. So this doctor went out onto the stoop of his clinic, and he asked the people in the line, "Hey, is anybody getting married? Any children rituals, or anybody funerals?" And then some little kid raised his hand and came forward and explained that there was a wedding. And so the doctor paid him a couple of rupees to take us on his bicycle, because we had bicycles, my friend and I, and we biked through the forest, through these single track pathways, walking paths, to get out to this wedding, to this village. And this was the groom, and he's got turmeric spread all over his body. If you go to the next slide, when we arrived, they were very surprised, as you could imagine. There were no cell phones or phones to call ahead at that time. This woman who was the shaman of the tribe, she sat us down and she blessed us with some rice and some flower petals, and she put a red dot on our foreheads and said some prayers over us, and then we were cleansed and purified to be able to enter this ritual with these folks. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that the wedding couple in the Warli tribes, on the dung-walled huts of their homes, when they get married, they have a painting, a traditional tribal painting on the wall that is kind of like their marriage license, if you will. And if you'll go to the next slide, there's a little close-up of a section. You see up at the top, see at the bottom, you see the horses and the daily life going on, people carrying water on their heads. But up at the top, you could see these sort of multi armed beings and multiple-headed beings and ladders that go to nowhere and birds that are flying. That's the other world. That's the shamanic other world that they're representing. So these people live in a reality that there's a reality here that we go through every day, drinking water, carrying water, doing our work. And then there's another reality that we can touch. And that reality is sometimes called the overworld or the other world or the underworld. So if you go to the next slide, this is me in India, up in the Himalayas of India. That's me there with no beard and a full head of hair.
Wow.
Yeah, this was 1992, so it's been a little while. But these men are sadhus. They're holy men in the Hindu tradition. They live with no money. They only get the gifts that people give them. The man here on my right in the picture is on your left. His hair. He hasn't cut his hair in over 40 years. So that's part of his devotion, is to not cut his hair. It goes down to his ankles, and when he wears it up, it's way up high, and you can imagine how heavy that is. But that's the rest of his life, he's made a promise that he's not going to cut his hair. If you go to the next slide, you'll see this man is a sadhu as well, and he follows the god Shiva. Shiva is considered is a gray-colored god in the pantheon of Hindu gods. So many of these sadhus will cover their bodies in ash for ritual sake. And so he's covered in ash, and in his hand, he's holding a clay pipe called a chillum. It's a cone-shaped pipe that they put tobacco and hashish in that pipe, sometimes other herbs and substances, and they pray to Shiva, they say blessings, and then they smoke this pipe. And you can see that gentlemen like farmers and others in the village will come for a ritual, and they use these substances, in this case, a form of marijuana, to have a transcendent experience, to change their consciousness, to be able to step beside their life the way they see it and see it a little bit differently. You hear a lot of people who use hallucinogenics in this country and other places. There's peyote rituals by some of the native tribes in North and Central America. Ayahuasca and all kinds of other things that people will take drugs. And now we're seeing this more even in clinical psychiatry in the United States, where people are using mushrooms and psilocybin and other things to help people who have PTSD, for example, to be able to sort of get outside of the whole way they're seeing their lives, to get far enough away that they could look back on their lives and go, gosh, I'm not seeing this right. There's other ways to see my life. And so it's a kind of way to move beside ourselves, if you will, for a period of time, to look back on our lives, to see if we're living it the way that we want to live it, and it gives us a chance to do some healing and change. So if you go to the next slide, this is the last of my slides, but this is in Turkey, and this is where some of you have heard the poems of Rumi from the 13th century. This is where Rumi lived, and this is they're often called whirling dervishes, but it's a form of Sufi, mystical Islamic ritual. And what they're doing here is that the man in the black is the sheikh, they call him. He's the religious leader. And each one of these folks who are doing this dance, they line up in a circle and they stop and they bow before the sheikh, and then they start spinning and they spin out into a circle around the room, and then the next person bows and starts spinning. They spin for 10 minutes or 12 minutes, just spinning like this, around and around and around, and then he'll say something, the sheikh will say something, and then they'll all just back up into a circle. And I don't know how they don't fall over at that point. And then they start again, and they bow to him, and then they start spinning, and they do this for an hour and a half or more, this ritual. And they talk about getting into an altered state, a trance kind of a state. Well, why have people been doing this all over the world and in all different kinds of cultures? It's something that people do to reach the joy at the center of creation. To reach the joy at the center of creation and to experience and to return to an exuberance that often we lose after we're children. To return to an understanding of the gift of life, which sometimes we can forget about, especially in difficult times like many of us are going through, or our country is going through, and our world is going through. It can be easy to lose touch with the very gift of life and the very joy at the center of life. And these kinds of rituals help people to reconnect with that. So as the world gets darker, more difficult, more troubled, and more uncertain, every once in a while, stepping into the ecstatic is one of the ways to renew our eyes to see beauty and our feelings of joy and the very gift of life. So I want to say a word about this. Our theme this month is overcoming evil. And if you think about this from, I started thinking about Pentecostalism and how Pentecostalism is another form of trance state that people are, that is an American experience here that comes out of Christianity and Christian mysticism or transcendence. And if you think about the origins of it, it comes from Africans who came to this land, didn't just come, but were kidnapped and brought to this land and put in atrocious situations. Africans many of them had in their traditions before they ever came here, trance-like rituals of dance and shamanic rituals of spirit possession. So the folks knew how to do that, how to go to another world within this world. And so as slavery continued in this country, you saw more and more Africans who would find ways to sneak off of the plantation or do whatever they needed to do these kinds of rituals. Well, as they began to be taught more and more about Christianity, the folks started to, they started to blend some of the Christian stories and language and music into what they were doing. In one way, that was just for safety, because they had to do that in order to protect themselves from, it was sort of okay if you did a Christian ritual, wasn't okay if you did other rituals. Drums were often used to communicate, and so the plantation owners didn't like slaves using drums. So folks found other ways to create music and song and dance to transport themselves out of this world, which you can imagine was awful and atrocious, that told people they were not people at all and told them there was something very wrong and less than about them. And they found this way to get out of that world and look back from a place that reminded them of who they were, what the joy of life is and the gift of life is in the midst of atrocious pain and awful realities. So if you think about this form of transcendence was a way that the Africans who came into this country survived through slavery, survived even through segregation, where still people were told that they were somehow less than human. And it was these kinds of experiences. And what I've realized about Pentecostalism is that, I grew up, I'm, middle class, white kid in the suburbs, grew up Unitarian Universalist, in fact. And I was always taught that there was something wrong with, like, Pentecostalism was weird. It was, like we talk about holy rollers or, these strange people, this sort of thing that people did that it was really demeaned and diminished. And it was something that, I always just grew up thinking, Pentecostal, gosh, what is that? Whatever it is, it's not what I am, and it's not something I would ever do. And what I've learned is that when you colonize a people, one of the ways that you do that is that you demean and you diminish their forms of survival, and you demean and diminish their forms of spirituality and religion. And so it makes a lot of sense. And I realize now, as I'm growing to appreciate Pentecostalism as a form of transcendent or ecstatic worship, and where it comes from and how it's helped people to survive and and how it helps people to survive even in this day and age, and it gives people an experience of joy and life and its giftedness and their own sense of wholeness, that I'm decolonizing my own mind. And I want us all to decolonize our minds and stop demeaning a truth. What's funny is, so I grew up, as a Unitarian Universalist, I could do yoga, I could stand on my head to find God and get into all kinds of crazy, positions. And I could sit like a pretzel and say various vowel sounds over and over again in a Buddhist ritual to connect with spirit and God. But if I did anything that was sort of charismatic or Pentecostal, that was weird, right? Think about that for a second. So what I realized was that these are all different ways that people have used to find transcendence and their own sense of wholeness and healing in life. And so I have a great respect now, not necessarily for all the theology that's been put on top of that experience in any of these traditions necessarily. I don't buy wholesale, nor do I understand completely all of the theologies that they put on top of the experience. But what I do know is the experience itself is legitimate. It's a real human experience that people have that they find helpful and whole. I was reading a really interesting book by an author named Linda Barry, Barry. She just won a MacArthur grant, Genius Grant. She was talking about her first experience going to a Pentecostal worship. She's a white person. Her and her sister, due to a bunch of things that had happened, they end up going with their neighbor to this African-American Pentecostal service. She'd never seen anything like it. She said, we would have been kicked out of our Catholic church if we did what these people, were yelling, they were singing really loud, dancing. And she said, but it was just like, it came to this crescendo, and it was, she had no idea what was going on, but she told her sister, like, let's keep, let's act, let's kind of move around because we don't want people to, think we're different or something. And then what she was amazed about, which I loved, was she said, and then when it was over, everybody's just walking out, shaking hands and seeing okay, see you tomorrow. Everyone, like, it was just as normal as could be. And they were all fine. Nobody went crazy. Nobody was acting weird. Everybody was back to business. And she's like, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. And then she learned to see it was just such a beautiful thing that she'd experienced. If you were here a few weeks ago, we did a service to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. Yeah, some of you were here. And it was great. The music was phenomenal. Yes. And we began the service with our newest minister, Yadni Hailu, who did a beautiful service at 10 o'clock this morning, sermon at 10 o'clock this morning. She used the words that opened up Woodstock 50 years ago, which were by a Hindu Swami. And he had everybody that was there do this chant. And it was a chant that used the words Ram and Shanti. Shanti means peace, and Ram is one of the names of God. And so we did this in the services as we started our Woodstock service, and everybody was chanting, Ram, Shanti, 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 Ram, Shanti, Shanti. And we just were doing it over and over, just like they did at Woodstock. And pretty soon you could feel like we were feeling when Mariella was leading us in movement and clapping and dancing. You could feel this vibration, this energy. It was powerful and palpable and beautiful. And what I realized, chanting is one of the ways that people find transcendence. And it creates a vibration. And we're also creating a vibration that people have been creating for thousands and thousands of years. So we're tapping into something ancient and eternal, if you will. So what I want to say about this as I come to a close here in a moment is that I know African American Christians who talk about the word Jesus and the name Jesus or Christ as words that for them invoke something, the idea of God or the eternal that is much beyond what most of us think of as Western Christianity. So this person is saying, my experience when I'm singing to Jesus or praying to Jesus, I know I'm saying a word that creates a vibration that my people for so many centuries have used to connect to a God that is beyond and bigger than and older than anything that we know of as Western Christianity or Protestantism. And so what I thought was so fun about the Woodstock service was we were all fine, even in a humanist, chanting Ram, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. But had we asked everybody to chant to Jesus Christ, you could imagine what would have happened in this church. But I want us to move beyond that fear of that name and that word. I don't want us to be the religion of everything but Jesus. And I want us to be a church of people who can also appreciate deeply the healing power that is available to us that also comes through Christian music and Christian prayers. And we have with us one of the country's foremost musicians of Christian sacred music in Pastor David Smith. When I travel around the country, with or without David, people talk to me about him. People know him all over this country for his music and for what he's done through Azusa and other parts of his life in the Church of God in Christ. So we have this master of sacred music through the Christian tradition, and we're so fortunate. And so more and more in this service, I'm just sort of preparing everybody as we continue to do more of moving towards having transcendent experiences in worship. We're going to build on the strengths of the New Dimensions Chorale and Pastor David Smith and the music that they bring us, just like today, that can bring us to incredible places of deep, deep joy. And we didn't even touch real, deep, far transcendence today. But I hope that as we continue, those who are interested will continue to come to this service and find here not only some healing around some of the damaged messages that we've gotten about Christianity and Jesus and the Bible, because there's just a lot of people who've come here who are like, I've had enough of that because of the way in which it's been presented or given to them, and I want us to heal that. I want us to be able to access the beauty of Christianity just as we do access the beauty of other traditions and philosophies and culture. So in this service particularly, we are going to work towards continuing to deepen our ability and our capacity to experience that deeper, richer, more subtle world that exists right within this world. So I want us to swim in the divine, to swim in the holy when we come together. After we're done, we'll go out there and shake hands and have coffee and talk about our work life and everything else. When I get into the pulpit or any of our ministers get into the pulpit, we're going to use our logical brain to talk about some of the psychology and philosophy and other things. But when we're singing and when we're moving and when we're hugging and embracing and shaking hands, let us feel the fullness of the joy of being alive and having bodies and having sensation and all of that. And to know that joy and that energy can be used to heal places within us, broken hearts and other kinds of even aches and physical aches and pains that can be healed. And in a world that we're living in and the times that we're living in with all that's happening, we need sometimes to be able to step aside and step out and open up our breath and be together and just feel the joy and the wholeness that exists within us and all around us and between us. So thank you for being here, for singing, for letting yourself experience a little bit of reckless abandon at least one day a week. And I have a lot more I'd love to say about this over time. So come back, tell your friends. If you love this kind of experience, bring folks and let's do more of it. There was years ago, I'll just say years ago during the 19th century, in the Second Great Awakening in Christianity, what happened was the Unitarians decided that this kind of more enthusiastic, emotional-based worship there was something wrong with it. And they took a big turn to being really hyper-rational. And this is part of the Enlightenment tradition in philosophy. And what we're doing right now is we're bringing this back together. We're healing this rift so that you don't have to choose between emotion and logic. You don't have to choose between rational and enthusiastic worship. We can have both, and we're going to have it more and more here. Thanks to David Smith, the New Dimensions Chorale, and thanks to you. So bless you. God bless you. Thank you. And let us continue to sing and dance and be merry.
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. The healing rain is falling down. The healing rain is falling down. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Will you take the hand of the person next to you for just a moment, please? Somewhere in our lives, every one of us has a wound that needs to be healed. There may be some who've come from a Pentecostal background or a Christian background, and you were wounded in that space. Cause you to walk away from it. There may be family members that you know who are walking in the Christianity, and you find there's a dissonance and a disconnect with them. But wherever you need healing, wherever in your soul, in our mind or our emotions, I believe that as we are together, that the Spirit of God, and I say it like that, the Spirit of God can do something miraculous and whole and healing in us. If you are ready to receive any place of healing in your life, anything that's needed, as we sing again, I'm going to invite you to just, if you want to lift your hands or just stand where you are, close your eyes. It is your song as you are ready. Would you look at someone and tell them, be healed and be whole? Tell someone that. Be healed, be whole. Tell someone else, be healed and be whole. Falling down, the healing rain is falling down. I'm not afraid, oh, I'm not afraid. Oh, the healing rain is falling down. The healing rain is falling down. Oh, I'm not afraid. Oh, the healing rain is falling. You can lift your hands and sing that. It's falling down. Oh, I'm not afraid. Let me hear you now. I'm not afraid. The healing rain, oh, the healing rain is falling down. Oh, the healing rain is falling down. I'm not afraid. Yeah. I'm not afraid. The healing rain is falling down. Your song. Healing rain is falling down. The healing rain is falling down. Oh, I'm not afraid. Oh, I'm not afraid. One more time. Healing rain, now the healing rain is falling down. Be healed and be whole. Healing rain is falling down. Be transformed. I'm not afraid. Be lifted.
We're so happy you're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
Each week, you'll receive special All Souls content tailored for you, our virtual members. Virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership.
We're grateful our ministries are having a positive impact on your life, and we want to share the good news of love beyond belief with more and more people. So no matter what, we need your support to keep this ministry growing and thriving, so please consider making a gift today. You can do so by texting
LOVEBB for Love Beyond Belief to 73256, or simply visit our website. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed
and be a blessing.